Hey, everybody. My name is Joe Runkle, and I have known Joy, the host of this wonderful show, for the better part of 20 years. We went to college together, we studied philosophy together, and got into a whole bunch of wonderful shenanigans.
Shenanigans.
Little bit about my background. I have a bachelor's degree in political science. I have a bachelor's degree in philosophy with an emphasis in metaphysics and logic. I have a Juris Doctorate from Thomas Jefferson School of Law. I'm a licensed attorney in the state of California, and I also do work as a business consultant. But more important than any of that crap, I'm a philosopher.
So as far as like instead of going into like some super deep and abstract philosophical questions, I just wanted to know your opinions and discuss just a little bit basic stuff. First of all, what do you think critical thinking is and why it's important for like the average person? Um, what are like existential dilemmas to you specifically? Like, why are you here and what's your purpose, which you actually already kind of answered, and then what you think like mindfulness and guidance are, the roles of them. So
Interesting. All right, so let's start with the first one. What do I think critical thinking is? Uh,
yeah, find time
so
to ask.
in critical thinking is involved in absolutely everything that I do.
Is there a time when you're not thinking critically?
I would say no. I would say no. There's no time in which I'm not thinking critically. But to be able to specifically define critical thinking, that's actually an interesting exercise because it's on the one hand, it's like you've got what's around you in spatial extension, and you have a set of ideas and beliefs based on your experience, right? And there is a pull between your emotions on the one hand and your rational thought on the other hand. And in my perspective, I see those two things as not necessarily in conflict always with one another, but more of two sides of the same coin. And depending on which, when making any type of a decision, whichever side that coin lands on is
Mm-hmm.
going to be the route in which the path that you take.
Mm-hmm.
Like for instance, let's go to an extreme: domestic violence.
Mm-hmm.
No one who's using critical thinking, no one who's using their rational mind to come to a conclusion would ever commit some kind of atrocity like that.
Mm-hmm.
You wouldn't do that. It's that their emotions have gone completely out the window.
Harming the person that
And
or people
right,
that you love.
correct, exactly. And there's no rational mind
Mm-hmm.
would ever choose that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like that. It's
It's
because it's
contradicting itself. I mean, these are
right.
people that you care for, and caring isn't harming.
It's wrong. So when I think about the concept of critical thinking, I think that it's mostly primarily number one about getting past your emotional attachments to things and
Mm-hmm.
making rational decisions. I think is probably the foundation of critical thinking.
Mm-hmm.
So it's being rational and using your common sense and not letting your emotions take control of any given situation. So I
Yeah.
think that that's the foundation. And then the next level of that would be understanding what's going on around you so that you can make in not just a rational decision but an informed rational decision. So when we talk about that, it's let's say that I'm going for a hike in the woods and I come across a snake. Now, depending on what type of snake that is, um, that could either be very dangerous and I could die out here, or I could also potentially have dinner,
Mm-hmm.
right? And like let's say I'm stranded in the woods or something, right? Not It's not like a day hike. It's like I'm out in the woods and I'm out of food. I'm
Right.
hungry. I need to make use my critical thinking to make the
Yeah.
best decision
Other
possible.
things have happened in your environment to bring you to this. point.
Correct, right, right. So like the base level of critical thinking, I think, is applying reason. And
Mhm.
then number two is having enough of knowledge and understanding about your surroundings and the specific circumstances that you're in to make the
Mhm.
best possible decision based on what your goals are.
Mhm.
Right? So,
Okay.
so in order to be a critical thinker, you at least need to have an idea about the direction that you're headed. You need to have
Yeah.
uh, as much information as possible, and you need to be thinking with your reasons and not making decisions from purely an emotional place.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
still
I
don't
like.
know that I've actually come up with a definition for critical thinking on the fly with any of that, but I can at least point in the direction of what I
Yeah.
think it is and examples of when I can see it.
Yeah. Yeah. I like the 2 points of knowing, essentially knowing where you're going and knowing where you are.
Oh,
Um.
and just for the listener, I didn't get these questions ahead of time. I got these questions on the spot. So just keep that in mind when you're throwing out judgments and putting comments. Things we get to like.
No, but I think that's a really good point, that like a lot of people don't think critically or have a really hard time thinking critically because one, they haven't taken enough of like a an understanding or whatever of their environment, whatever the environment is, like the room they're in or the people they're around or like whatever their options are. They just haven't gotten a good read on it. And then two, they don't know where the hell they're going. Like we just, especially if we're driven by emotions, it's just like, oh, this is what I'm feeling and I'm just going to let them point me in some direction
Right.
instead of like what I'm trying to do is this, and then this happened and I still got to get to that.
Right, right. And critical thinking and you see, I mean, there's two schools of thought here, right? As far as like the ancient philosophers are concerned,
Yeah.
you've got the group of people that your life is a sailboat and you go in whichever way the wind takes, right?
Yeah.
And that's a very magical, peaceful, wonderful way to look at life.
The
But
dirty footed hippie over here.
it strikes me a little naive. I mean, for me personally, it's I'm a goal oriented individual.
Right.
I set a goal and then I find a fucking way to get there. And
Hmm.
then if I find out once I'm there that I don't like the terrain that I'm on, then I set a new goal.
Hmm.
But I set a goal and go as far as I can towards it,
Yeah.
and then go somewhere else. And if I like let life just take me by the sail, I'd probably be a bartender in Costa Rica. Like,
I can see that.
you know, it's
Yeah.
like, hey, I'm gonna go surf and hang out. This is great.
Hmm.
But and then the other side of it is using your reason, like the one thing that sets us apart from other animals on the planet. Like that's the
Yeah.
one thing is our ability to reason.
Yeah.
So there's no reason why we shouldn't operate with that. We don't have natural. There may be some, but for the most part, we don't have natural instincts
Mm.
that purely drive us. I mean, the want for sex, maybe that's an actual instinct that drives
Mhm.
us. But I mean, for the most part, bears in the woods aren't sitting there thinking about what are my goals? What's the plan? No, that bear just woke up from hibernation. He's like, fuck, I'm hungry. Let's go do that. Right? But people aren't that way.
Might have to start making a list of like other discussions we need to have. The what instincts do we have? The role of instincts, that kind of stuff. I
I would love to do a podcast on the state of nature in comparison to the Republican and the Democratic Party.
state of nature. What is that? Hume or
So on the conservative side, that would be Hobbes and
okay?
and the Hobbes wrote the Leviathan. He was like 90 something years old, and then it would have been Niccolo Machiavelli
Ah,
uh,
okay, yeah,
who wrote The Prince. So
yeah,
almost all modern political conservative philosophy is
yeah,
based on those two books in some way, or was
yeah.
built from that foundation, where it would be Locke and Rousseau would be more of the liberal leftist side of political philosophy, all the way
Relative,
down to like the state of nature.
yeah.
Um, And that's honestly how I came to form my political beliefs, was that, well, Hobbes and Machiavelli are fucking assholes. Um, Generally speaking, I don't know how
Yeah.
I got off on that tangent. You're gonna have to do a lot of editing for this.
Yeah. It's fine. It's
I'm
fine.
sorry. I'm sorry.
That's why I said, there's originally why this was like the white guys I know, because the white guys I read
We're still
were
going with that title, right? The white guy.
no, 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 still working, but I just haven't thought of anything better.
But
It's
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 so
not.
good. It's so good.
Because
He's
what happens when I
totally doing.
interview with somebody who isn't white, a white guy?
We'll adopt him for a day. It's fine. It's fine. You have my express permission.
if if you could have an honorary black card, then certainly some Sill could have an honorary white guy card.
I don't see
What,
why not. I don't see why not. We'll get him a
there,
pocket protector and
there
everything.
might be something to that.
Tight jeans. You got to hold your butt together when you walk. It's got to be tight.
Next question on existential dilemmas. So clearly, I am using this as a piece of my work now because I've always loved existentialism. That's just me. I like thinking about why I exist. Do I exist? That's fun times for me. But I think it is. I genuinely believe that this is relevant for other people as well. So you can choose to answer either what just kind of your thoughts on existential dilemmas, or tell me exactly why are you here and what is your purpose.
Okay. So normally on these types of things, I don't enjoy dabbling into the dark arts. Uh, but all of that being said, well, to begin with, existentialism is dangerous. It's dangerous for most people. Uh,
Mm,
uh, because like Nietzsche said, if you stare, be careful whilst fighting monsters, lest you become one. For when you
uh-huh.
stare into the abyss, it also stares back into you.
Yeah.
That's a perfect screen snapshot for what existentialism is. Now,
Okay.
you put on your mental suit of armor and you
Yeah.
jump into the fucking hole.
Yeah.
Okay, there's a lot of folks who don't come back out of that hole.
That is right.
They go into a deep, 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 dark, solitary, isolated place, um, which is kind of the opposite of an ivory tower. It's an ebony tower, maybe. I don't. I forget the
I mean,
forget.
if we're still in a tower, we're still alone and
Correct.
separated from
You're
others.
you're
But
you're
yeah,
alone. You are by yourself. You are in the dark. You
yeah,
have no light, and
yeah.
you are searching for meaning, and you're searching for purpose. Now, most folks who dabble in existentialism, um, they either touch it and are terrified by it, and then they
Mm,
run away. But for those of us who have jumped into that hole,
mhm,
um, I'd say most folks don't come out of it.
mm.
However, I do think that there is enlightenment on the other side of it if you can make it through it.
Yeah,
Um,
I agree with that.
but the cost that has to be paid, for most folks may be too high,
Mm,
if that makes sense. Now, as far as you know, my purpose, my existential dilemmas, my albatrosses that I've had to bear, that I've
mm.
had to carry with me for finding meaning and finding existence. Finding why are we here? What's the whole point of this? Is this just some sad exercise? Are
Mhm.
we hooked up to a computer somewhere and this is a simulation? Um, you know, is this what's the halfway point between heaven and hell in Christian dogma? A Catholic.
Earth?
Yeah, yeah. It's like a train station in between the afterlife. Purgatory.
Oh,
Purgatory.
oh,
Yeah. Earth might well be purgatory. This
okay.
this might be the ground for something higher. And
Yeah,
ultimately, existentialism ties in quite nicely with the major problems in metaphysics. So you have these big core, huge metaphysical dilemmas that have no answer, and
Mm-hmm.
existentialism is connected to that. Um, and so in existentialism, we're asking questions about meaning and being and nothing and understanding and why and purpose. And the answers that we seek, uh, ultimately, those answers lie somewhere in those metaphysical problems,
Mm.
which have no answer, at least not any answer that any human mind can answer or come up with or even come close to touching. I mean, the physicists think they've got something with space time, but they've still got plenty of problems there. But
Mhm.
that I've digressed. So ultimately, in existentialism, what's really, really most important is number one, becoming comfortable accepting the idea that even though we're not alone, there are people around us.
Mhm.
Ultimately, you really are alone,
Mhm.
but it's okay because you're strong enough to be alone.
Yeah.
And for
Yeah.
that to be okay,
Yeah.
most people can't ever get past that hurdle.
Right. It's okay to be alone.
It's
You're
okay.
okay.
We're born into this world alone. We will die
Yeah.
alone.
Yeah.
Um, and if you want somebody to truly, really understand you, that's probably not going to happen, uh,
Right.
because of our subjective experience, because of our subjective understanding, and because of, simply put, people's mental capabilities.
Yeah.
And if you're the type of person who's already dove into existentialism, there's probably a pretty solid chance that cognitively and mentally you've already eclipsed almost everyone around you. Uh, Sound like an elitist, but you know, people are good at different things, and philosophers are good at thinking and about asking questions and
Yeah.
about the pursuit of knowledge and understanding and truth.
Yeah.
Um, and that doesn't interest, I'd say, 98% of people.
So let me ask you something before moving on to these last two things. Just staying on existentialism for a moment. So again, a reason that I have chosen to take this on and to like attempt to give it to masses, as it were, is because I definitely am of the opinion that people are experiencing existential crises right now, and they maybe don't even realize it. So it's kind of like, to use a like loose analogy, like how people have like taken over the word like aesthetic, like, people have like this vague understanding of like what an aesthetic is, which hurts my philosophical soul to like hear that phrase as I see it does yours, but they're on to something. And so people are questioning, but they don't know really what they're questioning. They don't really know what they're doing right now. People are asking or coming up against these really heavy, like, well, what the fuck am I doing here? What the fuck is the purpose of all this? If there's all of this strife, if there's all of this, like, the rug has been swept from under me, if I now have no support, if I don't know, just people have these crises right now. So do you believe, well, I guess, one, do you agree that people are having existential crises? And two, do you believe that the average person can get themselves out of or through that pit of despair? Because what you set up is pretty damn bleak for the philosopher, for the academic philosopher. And I like really agree with you, which is why it's taken me so long to come back around personally.
So for function of critical thinking,
Mm-hmm.
eh, to loop it back to critical thinking, um, I approached existentialism in the very same way that I approach real world problems.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, okay, so let's just say that I am alone. And
Mm-hmm.
let's say that I'm on a solitary path through the dark to try to find my purpose, to
Mm-hmm.
try to find what's important in life. Now, after after first of all, in order to even let me go back. Yes, I do think that a large portion of people in America are having an existential crisis, whether they know it or not. And
Mm-hmm.
I think a large part of that has to do with the foundation of their beliefs not being solid.
Mm-hmm.
So, for most people, their foundation, their belief system isn't based on philosophical, well, it is based on philosophical principles, but it's not based on philosophical principles that they've chosen and made massive efforts to try to be consistent,
Yeah.
which is what part of what critical thinking does. And it
Yeah.
is the full-time job of the philosopher
Yeah.
to try to be honest, try to be true, try to be consistent.
Live
Um,
that truth, as it were.
and that's true about your beliefs and everything else. But the very core foundation, at least for me, what I believe, is is centered around good and evil. It's centered around good and bad. It doesn't even necessarily have to be good and evil. It could just be positive and negative, right?
Mhm.
Don't get caught up in the syntax of that, but you have to have a foundation about what it is to be good, which is
Mhm.
a very difficult thing to simply define. Lots of folks have done it from whether you're talking about utilitarianism, Kantian ethics, whatever. It's you need to be good and you need to do right by other folks, right? And part of that is doing right by yourself. Um, and in order to do that, back to that foundation, if we set up, we look inside of ourselves and we think about what it is that we believe and why we believe it, um, I think that the majority of the population would find that their beliefs are centered either around, they're centered based on either what their family has taught them or what some institution has taught them, whether that's Christianity, whether that's government, whether that is,
Yeah.
just the local community or whatever.
Yeah.
Um, and they simply accept these things to be true, because they grew up around it and they had no reason to second guess it because everybody else around them thought that those things were true,
Mhm.
right? Now, whether those things are true or not is irrelevant. What most people don't do is they don't take the time to have the introspection, to take the time to work on themselves, to figure out what they believe, and to ask the question if those beliefs are consistent with their other beliefs. And if those beliefs aren't consistent with your other beliefs, then you need to change them.
Yeah.
Um,
Some.
and so at the beginning of this, I think that if people who are suffering from those types of issues and things first need to look within and
Mhm.
try to figure out what their core beliefs are and what they know to be right, what they know to be good. And then they need to make every effort to try to be consistent across their beliefs to create a solid foundation. And that foundation is the first step to climbing out of that existential hole.
Mhm.
In At least it was for me.
Mhm.
So I had to take a real hard look at my ethics, my beliefs, my belief system, um, my understanding about God, my understanding about my family, about human nature, about the people around me. Once I was able to do that, um, I was able to find a lot of peace.
Mhm.
Now, I know that I'm not going to come up with answers on whether or not God's real. I know that I'm not going to be able to come up on an explanation for how space and time work together and interact with one another.
Mhm.
Um, but through those types of exercises, I was able to find peace and happiness. Number one, accepting that maybe I won't ever be fully understood by anyone, and that's okay. That's all right. That's not something I can control. That's something that I have to accept. And with acceptance comes peace.
Mhm.
As far as that being alone thing is concerned.
Yeah.
Now, as far as finding purpose, I really think that the only purpose that we have in life, um, is, well, it's to be happy. If I had to all boil it down to just one thing, I would say it's the pursuit of happiness.
Mhm.
It's chasing your dreams. It's following. It's not choosing to just be stuck. Uh, it's about moving forward, and then also on the other hand of that, I also think it's about accepting the things that you can't control. I mean, I've
Mm,
slipped from existentialism and ancient Stoic philosophy there, but they're connected.
mhm.
Did that answer any of that question?
Yeah, I
That's
think so.
my thoughts about it. And
Yeah, yeah, I think so. I think, folks, that having that solid foundation or not having a solid foundation speaks to why folks are so like imbalanced or shaky. I mean, it's literal, it's metaphorical. It makes a lot of sense. If on my darkest days now, um, I used to be suicidal. And so I know that now in my darkest days, that is not my foundation. That is not my rock bottom. My rock bottom might be, laying in bed all day long and eating all of the crap food and not exercising and not being social, like doing the things that I know rationally will help me to get out of that pit of despair. But the foundation used to be my life needs to end. So if folks have
if that's the goal, if
right,
that's where you're starting,
right.
then you're never going to move forward.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, and so there used to be other things that I thought were my foundation, and those things broke or failed or disappeared or like betrayed me, and then that's what I was left with. Then yeah, I was fucked. And I think that you're absolutely correct that if a person builds their self-worth or their self-image or their like understanding of life on some set of rules that like are no longer there or can't answer questions for them or isn't supportive, then they're going to be fucked.
Like if you look at like Christianity, or actually most religions,
Mhm.
and not to bag it, if any of my family's watching, I'm Methodist. Um, all of that being said, I would much rather have spent the years of time that it took me to build my own foundation. And I grew up in a very, very, very Christian, very conservative home. Good family. It was wonderful, great childhood. Um, and a lot of the things that I believe, after looking internally and really thinking about it and really assessing it, a lot of those things align perfectly with the values that I grew up with. But the difference here is I want to be a good person for the sake of being a good person, and I want to help people for the sake of helping people. I don't want to do that just because some man in the sky told me that I was going to burn in a lake of fire. I don't need a threat to be a good person, uh, or to do good things for other people, right?
Yeah.
I don't know where I was going with that, but I do think that it's related.
Yeah. I mean, if something comes along and challenges the the man who's going to burn you, um or something comes along to like take that out of the way, or like somebody doesn't believe that and yet they're still a good person, then that like shakes people up. It's like, wait, but how can you be good? How do we still believe in the same kinds of good when your foundation is different than mine? And if your foundation isn't as sturdy, then that really knocks you off. Like, maybe I shouldn't be good, which
you
doesn't
know,
seem like it should be.
the house could never stand without a proper foundation. Uh, so if you don't take the time for that introspection
Yeah.
and for that deep dive into your own morality and into your own existence and into
Yeah.
those types of things, then by default it will be shaky because you're just repeating something that somebody else has said. You're not critically thinking for yourself.
Yeah. Sorry, my dog is trying to.
By the way, that was a little misogynistic. The man in the sky is going to burn you. I'm pretty sure God's a lady. He wouldn't have put our genitals on the outside otherwise.
There's some beautiful forests out there. I don't know any. No, no. Okay. So the last
The earth
two.
does seem to be super artistic, which also makes me think it could be elated.
um,
Bob Ross.
the last two things I wanted to cover, just your opinions on the role of mindfulness and the role of guidance. So, I don't know if you've
Let's start
ever
with mindfulness.
practiced
Let's start
mindfulness
with
actively, but you certainly have it as part of your life.
Okay, so when we talk about mindfulness, and we talk about, so this is directly related to being happy. This
Okay.
is directly related to, it's directly connected to some Stoic philosophy, which, if the viewers don't know yet, I'm avid, as far as ancient philosophy goes, Stoicism is my jam. Um,
So,
but all that being said, when we talk about mindfulness, mindfulness is about being in the present. It is about being present. It's, it's okay to take those introspective journeys where you're thinking about your foundation, you're thinking about your life, you're thinking about existential dilemmas, you're thinking about philosophy in general, or just contemplating things. Um, that is being present in a way.
mhm.
Mentally, you're present. You're working on yourself.
Yeah.
Um, that's a great exercise. That's the purpose of meditation, in my opinion, is that specifically. It's to be present. It's to think about yourself. It's to think about your beliefs, your views. What's important in life. Um, but mindfulness is also about being present when you're not, on the astral realm. You're here. You're
Mhm.
dealing with everyday interactions. Um,
Mhm.
I'm reminded of like the phrase, "Don't forget to stop and smell the flowers." That is mindfulness. It's that's it. Um, if you live in the past, if you're constantly thinking about the past and what happened, you will find your life filled with regret.
Mhm.
If you are constantly living in the future, constantly worried about what's going to happen next. Is COVID going to get worse? Is
Mhm.
all of California going to burn down? It doesn't matter what it is. Uh, you know, if you're worried about the future constantly, then you live your life filled with anxiety. And real peace is found living in the moment,
Mhm.
it being present.
Yeah.
So, you know, I think it's important to look back to the past so that we can learn from history and we can learn from our mistakes. But to spend too much time there just causes regret. And I think that if you look into the future, and you're constantly, I think that's important too, because number one, you need to know what the hell's coming at you.
Yeah.
You need to know what kind of shit is going down so that you can be prepared. But if you spend all of your time living in the future, then you completely fail to enjoy the present. And so I think personally for me, I think it should be maybe 5% living in the past,
Mhm.
10% at the most. I think it
Okay.
should be 20% living in the future, just so that you're prepared. And the other 70% of that time, 75% of that time should be spent trying to be mindful, trying to live in the present, and to find peace and to extract as much joy out of every moment that you have, pun intended, uh, so that you can be at peace, and so that you can have happiness and enjoyment in the moment. I could lose everything. I could lose my wife. I could lose my job. I could lose my business. I could get criminal charges. I could have a ton of things all happen to me at once. But that doesn't mean that I can't just stop for a moment and smell the flowers. And what I should be focused on is that flower, not living in regret and not being anxious about the future. Now, that doesn't mean that you don't plan for the future. And it doesn't mean that you don't work for the future. It doesn't mean you don't learn from the past. Um, But if your goal is happiness, if that's what your existential purpose is, then mindfulness, I think, plays one of the largest parts of it. Um,
I like something that you've implied there, and I really just want to repeat it, like for myself, because I hadn't thought of it in these terms. Of if you are gonna, of course, we should think of the past and the future. And if we are gonna do that, in your terms, think of the past and maybe 10%, think of the future and maybe 20, and then think of be present, be here 70%. At least that be where your mind is, because and it makes sense for the future should have more, should hold more
you have to make
energy,
plans. You have
more
to set
focus.
goals.
Yeah. I mean, the past is done. I mean, the future isn't here either. Both of them are non-existent, but the past is done. Like there is nothing we can do to affect it. Um, in the future we can. So I really like that. That's something that's helpful for me to keep in mind.
Well, I hope whatever I said was helpful to, if it could be helpful to at least one person, and it sounds like it may have already happened, then that's
Okay, so the last thing is just the role of guidance. Um, whether it was my therapist or like, yes,
guidance.
guidance.
I don't think that we can talk about guidance without also talking. Um, See, I don't even know if I'm not sure. Actually, let me get some clarification. I
Okay.
prefer to use the terms influence and manipulation as opposed to the general overarching term of guidance. And if you'll allow me a moment to talk about it through those two lenses,
Go for it.
I think that makes more sense.
Quite the dichotomy right there.
You'll always find I'm consistent. Back to that foundation, that moral playbook, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so what I do know through working as an attorney for over a decade, being a philosopher for more than 20 years, um, there are the dark arts and there are the good arts. Um, think the Sith and the Jedi for a Star Wars reference might be a pretty solid reference for this.
Okay.
So first, we'll talk about manipulation. In my opinion, I don't think that your goal should ever be to manipulate anyone. And I think that the term manipulation, I use that as opposed to influence, because manipulation implies selfishness, and it implies that you are taking advantage of someone.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas influence is you're just simply trying to do good for someone.
Mm-hmm.
And so a couple of things, characteristics about the two. Um, when I think about manipulation, manipulation is a fast acting rhetoric tool that people will use to get what they want immediately. However, manipulation doesn't last. Manipulation may be able to influence or change someone's opinion or allow you to get what you want in the moment. However, that bridge with that person that you manipulated will forever be damaged, if not burned completely, because they know that you took advantage of them. Because after they had a chance to sit down and reflect on what happened, they realized they got a raw deal,
Mm-hmm.
right? They have been screwed over. And whether even if they don't consciously think that, subconsciously they're going to know that going forward. Um, so manipulation, in my opinion, should never be used for purposes of trying to get someone to do anything, right? Um, and practicing that type of dark art in the philosophical realms um, only leads to heartbreak, sadness, and destruction.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and so the more you try to manipulate the people around you, the shallower you become, the shittier your life will be overall.
Mm-hmm.
So I would strongly discourage people from ever doing that because it hurts you. It hurts you mentally. It hurts you socially. It's whatever small gain that you could get today is not worth the sadness and isolation that you're projecting yourself towards.
Mm-hmm.
That's my thought on that. Now, as
Okay.
far as influence is concerned, if you are trying to help someone and you're trying to do right by them and you're trying to lead them on a path to do something better than where they are. Um, we've already ruled out manipulation. That's not going to work. That is a short term goal getter that only causes you suffering in the long run. But influence and guide or guidance, I guess you could say, in this state, is a is not. There's never an immediate result.
Mm.
There's never some sort of visible or measurable positive impact that you're going to get right away. There may be some rare examples in which that does happen, but for the most part, that doesn't happen that way.
Long game.
So, if correct, this is about planting a seed, nurturing that seed, and watching that seed grow. If you'd like to see your loved ones or your family members or something grow as a person, grow internally, um, then there are a number of things that you can do to plant those seeds. Um, First of which is your own actions, how you carry yourself, I think is of the utmost importance because people, for the most part, when they do learn from you or are influenced by you, because obviously well, not obviously, it's not an obvious thing, but in my personal opinion, I believe that our contact and interactions with each other uh, leaves marks
Hmm.
both ways. You know,
Yeah.
the old adage, if you sleep with dogs, you get fleas. That's true. I think it's true.
Yeah.
But it works the other way too. You know, if you surround yourself by angels, you surround yourself by good people,
Mm.
and you try to do good things and positively impact other people through both
Mm.
your words and your actions, you can make real lasting impacts and lasting changes on people's lives. And a lot of those, you won't hear about again.
Yeah.
Good example. Good example. So after I sold my interest in the last law firm, and was riding my motorcycle around the continent, I stopped in North Carolina for 9 months. And during that time, I helped coach a wrestling team um, at the local high school. Um, just a couple weeks back, I'd known these kids for 9 months, right? One of those kids texted me the other day and was like, Coach Runkle, I just wanted you to know that you had such a big impact on me. You were like the father I never had.
Oh.
Mind blown, right?
Yeah.
That makes my heart melt. And I had no idea that I had that impact on that kid. Mostly I was just teaching him how to work hard, and, how to drink the blood of your enemy. Uh, from
Right.
a wrestling perspective, right?
Yeah.
I came in there to teach those kids how to be winners.
Yeah.
Um, but my time with them clearly made an impact, and I
Yeah.
didn't know that going into it. But I carried myself in the same way that I always do. I try
Yeah.
to be a good person. I try to help where I can. Um, so as far as guidance goes, to if somebody wants a Sherpa, if somebody wants you to spoon feed them their
Mm.
philosophy and their beliefs and all of that, go to church.
Mm.
Um, Real growth and real guidance is about leading by example, and it's about planting small seeds to
Mm.
show that and to help foster those seeds and that growth. You know what I mean? Like my
Mm.
wrestlers, they said something good, they did something good, I rewarded them. I was proud
Mm.
of them. I let everybody know it. Another good example with the wrestling team, somebody was yelling, called someone a faggot on the bus on the way to a tournament.
Mm.
I had the bus driver pull the bus over, and I got up and we had a very, very, very long conversation about bigotry and hatred,
Mm.
and racism and sexism and all of that. It was
Mhm.
like, you know what, you're not going to be on my team if you're going to say and do things like that. That's not who we are. That's
Mhm.
not the type of character that you need to build. You should be ashamed of yourself.
Mm.
I planted a seed that day. Next time that he's going to say something stupid like that or something that's demeaning to somebody else,
Mhm.
for no other reason than to be hurtful, you know, The idea is that he's at least going to stop for a moment before he says something stupid like
Mm.
that. So
No.
when you have a teachable moment, you have to plant as many seeds as you can to try, not for you, not for anything selfish, just to try to help the people around you be better people. Now, is it right for me to say that I don't have all the answers, and
Right.
I don't know
Yeah.
what's right or what's wrong, but I have thought about it, and I've got a pretty good idea what I believe to be. So if I'm planting seeds that I believe are going to grow into something that I personally believe is good, that's helpful,
Yeah.
I think that's really the only way to give somebody guidance in a philosophical or spiritual context, at least. And anybody who tells you that they have the answers or they know what the truth is, those people run, run from those people like the plague.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll help you find the answers, or I'll tell you what answers I found. But
I'd be happy to always share my thoughts on a given situation.
yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
Also, one of the that's how I make my living is I give advice, whether that's law or business consulting or whatever. Um,
uh, yeah. Loaded question. Would it be fair? I've never thought of this before today, but would you think it's fair to call some social media influences social media manipulators?
oh, 100%. But so, and not a loaded question. Well, maybe loaded, but not a loaded answer.
Yeah.
So I love working with examples. I'll tell you one from last night. Okay.
Okay.
Incredibly conservative sister,
Uh-huh.
her incredibly liberal daughter, who
Uh-huh.
live in the same household, are sitting there watching the elections. And they got into an argument about something involving politics. And they both decided to Google it. So they Googled the exact same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Both of their feeds that came up should have been the exact same thing. They're in the
Yeah.
same location, they're in the same everything. They were completely different. So when you do a Google search, part of what it is, their algorithm, part of what they're doing is specifically tailored so that you hear what you want to hear,
Mm-hmm.
not what the actual truth is or anything else like that.
Yeah.
And so with search engine companies, with people who are basically running the internet, uh,
Yeah.
they have such a great control over what they think it is that you want to see so that you keep coming back to them,
Yeah.
that they tailor make your search engines based on the information data that they've already compiled about you specifically. So my conservative sister is getting, if she Googles, civic political unrest, right? She's going to see a bunch of far left wackos that are
Mm-hmm.
burning shit down and acting a fool. If my niece Googles the very fucking same thing, what
Mm-hmm.
she ends up getting is a group of Trump supporters surrounding a Biden Harris van in Texas,
Mm-hmm.
right? So Google is showing you what you want to see. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and if you're already politically leaning one way or the other, and I imagine this would apply across the board for anything, if you
Yeah.
lean one way or another and they're aware of it, and they are aware of it
Yeah.
because they listen to everything that, for the most part, we say and everything that we type, and they
Right.
catalog everything that we buy,
Yeah.
that naturally will push you in one way or another. And when we talk about social media platform like Facebook, uh, may have single-handedly destroyed our democracy,
Mm.
in my opinion. There is so much like hatred and negativity and keyboard commandos out there that are willing to just pop off at the fucking mouth over any and everything
Yeah.
just because they think it's funny and they don't think that there are any real repercussions.
Yeah.
But what's really happening there is It's dividing the country as a whole. And if
Mm,
Facebook is the sole group that provides the information that you see, then
mm-hmm,
they absolutely can tailor make anything specifically for you and in an effort to manipulate you and push you in any direction that they want.
mm-hmm.
Whether
You know,
whether you
what's
agree
funny?
with their political ideology or not,
Yeah,
that's deeply messed up. And
yeah.
I do think that the government probably, well, this is a philosophical, not a political conversation. But I think that there are some anti-monopoly laws that have been on the books for over 100 years, back when they
Mm,
built steel mills, that probably should be enacted. Uh,
mm,
because it's funny. The internet has put more information at our fingertips than ever before, and people
right,
are dumber than they've ever fucking been.
right.
They're constantly being manipulated and overwhelmed with information.
Yeah.
This advice for all of you people is just stop listening to any of that and go read Plato.
so what has just kind of dawned on me in the last couple weeks, especially this week with seeing these election results coming out, and not just election results, but seeing people's responses, my circle's responses to them, is a lot of kind of shock and awe. And I think there's been a fundamental misunderstanding about how truthful somebody's social media feed is. So if I'm looking at my Instagram, just as an example, that's a lot more democratic. Even though it's just stuff that I like, it's a hell of a lot more democratic than my Facebook feed, because people in my Facebook feed, it started with friends and family, and then it slowly has grown to like a few strangers here and there. But for the most part, it's just people that I know that believe and like stuff similar to what I like. So in addition to that, there's been this real big push over the last 4 years here in the United States for people to unfriend anybody, publicly state, unfriend me, or I unfriended these people because they had a different opinion. So there's just been a dwindling of any opinions that are going to come out that are going to be seen by us that differ from our own, in
And
addition to what you're speaking to.
I completely agree. And what's crazy about it is it's like, most folks don't keep up with politics. Most folks barely keep up with the evening news, and the
Hmm,
quality of all of the news has rapidly diminished because they're all fighting for scraps over ratings,
hmm.
right? A car chase is more important than a legislature assembly
If
bill.
it bleeds, it leads, yo.
Exactly, exactly. So these originally there were not originally, but in the recent past, there were small groups of people who actively keep up with these things. These are
Mhm,
your philosophers, your political scientists of the world.
mhm,
They're your economists that are actively looking at and debating among themselves, just like this
mhm.
conversation that you and I are having, right?
Yeah,
Then you've got the rest of the people who don't have that introspection, or they're just simply not interested in it, but it's
yeah.
being shoved down their throats. So, and it's being shoved down their throats in extreme ways. So when
Mhm,
it gets stuffed down your throat in an extreme way, you've
mhm,
already got a leaning one way or the other, right? So
mhm,
you just jump on that wagon and then accuse the other side of all being evil.
mhm.
And then that happens on both sides. And as a
Yeah,
result, that's created a massive amount of conflict. Um, and it's tearing the country apart. And
yeah.
that is almost exclusively Facebook's.
I mean, that's an extreme, pretty bold statement,
There
but
are
I
some other
I don't wholly
individuals
disagree.
on both sides that had something to do with it. I'll
Yeah,
leave that at that. But I see Facebook as being a major, major, major problem. Also, there's
yeah.
probably not enough people who got punched in the face for saying stupid shit.
There's that.
But
What is that line from a Pussifer song? You act a lot like somebody who's never been slapped in the fucking face or punched in the fucking face. It's great.
I don't know it, but that sounds right.
Yeah, it's something like that. But I mean that says a lot. And if it's not, honestly, I say this because I know somebody who does not have Facebook, is not very internet savvy, but has on Fox News 24/7 just as background. Really cool person, but when we start talking about certain things, it's like, oh, that's where those perspectives come from. Very fascinating.
Right.
So if it's not one, then it's the other. I think it's similar things are being done.
It's hard to say it's all one thing and not, anything else.
Yeah.
And if I did say that, I apologize.
Yeah,
But
alls and nevers aren't allowed here. Like,
in large part,
but
large part, Facebook has fueled a lot of awfulness that really just didn't deserve to be there. I'm liberal leaning. I've got a lot of Republican friends, which if anybody's ever been on my damn Facebook page,
I've seen some comments from some of your Republican friends.
I got people coming out of the woodwork from all kinds of different, very, very, very
Just
different.
want to say shout out to them. Hey y'all, I'm a good friend of Runkle's too.
Right. Yeah, no, like my Facebook page is a fucking war zone. It's a war zone.
It's a special place.
People just sit poised, waiting for me to post something so that they can let it all out. Yeah. And if you ever notice, for the most part, on all those posts, I'll post something that I think or that I thought was funny or something like that, and then that erupts into a war. I don't post again past the initial post, and then there's like 157 comments on this thing. People are threatening each other's kids and shit. Unbelievable. It's unbelievable. The sheer amount of idiocy on all sides, which is extra concerning because it doesn't seem like any party from either side cares about education. You don't go to college, and there's the other thing. The American dream's got people twisted. Like the American dream, you own, a house with 2.4 kids and a fence, and you've got a sedan or whatever. I don't even know that that's the American dream. What it represents is there's an opportunity for you to get rich, and real life isn't about money. And the reason that we're here, our purpose, I don't believe is about money.
No,
got nothing to do with it. Now, does money make it easier?
Right.
Certainly.
Absolutely.
But you don't have to have money to be happy. No. You don't have to be rich to be happy. I've lived in $1 million houses and had more money than I know what to do with, and I've also been poorer than anybody else I know. I've lived all those lives. It's one of those things that, but people are so obsessed with the money that they're willing to spend their entire lives sacrificing their mind and their body for it, just so that they can die with it. And you can't.
Something like that. If not the American dream, as in having the house and the children and the bling or whatever the fuck that is, then also the American idea. I don't know what officially this is, but it's definitely something in our lifetime that I've come to understand, of just we can do what we want, and that it again is not realistic, that it's not possible. There are consequences, and there are things that we do that we think we want that we actually might not. So folks who are trying to really cling to those two things, it is causing some damn ugliness. And I see this with folks who have come to this country from other countries, may or may not be naturalized, and especially in this political year, are expressing some very interesting opinions. Some people are more liberal than others, but it's especially like the conservative ones who come primarily from conservative countries, first of all, and then come here and say, I was not a citizen. I had to work very hard. And so look what I've done for myself to achieve the American dream. And then start acting very American. And it's like, wait, there's some things to unpack with being an American.
Yeah,
mainly those things that you were ignoring.
there's some history that you might not be aware of. Um, but all that
Yeah,
said, that comes back to
but
education. You know, and it, the rich, the super rich, the super rich
yeah,
don't need an educated populace.
yeah,
They need workers
yeah.
so that they could live their
This is
life.
not new. This is not new information. This is something. This is an education that we should have.
This goes back to as soon as they moved out of caves would have
Yeah,
been when this started.
yeah.
That hasn't changed ever. Um,
No.
but if we want, if the world is going to be a better place, then we need to level up everyone's education. And your educate the purpose of your education is not to make money. The purpose of your education is to be well-rounded and intelligent. It has nothing to do with money. People are like, oh my God, the university, yada yada. You know what? And you could put this publicly. You know, I owe damn near $750,000 in student loans that I'll never be able to pay back, and they're going to get 10% of my money for the rest of my days. And you know what? I would not trade any of it for my formal education. I would rather be in that debt and lose 10% for the rest of my damn life than to and the that number just keeps growing every year, by the way.
Yeah, exponentially, by the
I'm
way.
not even putting a dent in the interest, which just gets compounded into the principal. Um,
Yeah.
you know, when we talk about that, but was my education worth $1 million, $750,000?
Fuck yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
if more people understood that it's not about making money, it's about becoming well-rounded and learning to be a critical thinker,
Mm-hmm.
that that is worth more than all the gold in the
Yeah.
world.
Yeah.
Um, and most people, they don't see or understand that. They don't, you know, they're so brainwashed into thinking that money and Mercedes Benzes are what's important in life.
Thank you for your time. Thank you for your mind. Thank you for some laughs, as always.
Fucking love you. And
Love your uncle.
anytime you want to sit and have these talks, I'm all fucking about it. Even if